Before we get into this video, I do need to give a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about bullying / harassment, mental illness, and self-unaliving. So if that makes you uncomfortable, then don't watch, but also I do censor words and stuff, so it's okay. But, okay, let's get into the video. One last thing before we get into it, I realized whenever I went back onto Twitter to get the screenshots for this video that there was another interaction that I didn't talk about in this video. It's between her and some guy called Dom. I don't know anything about that. Like, I don't know who he is. So, you know, don't get your hopes up. I don't talk about that in this video. What I will say about it is that based off of what Gabbie was saying, I'm honestly on her side in that. But again, I'm very ill-informed on that. So that's not included in this video, but I still wanted to include it now, just to include everything. Okay. Hello, welcome back to my channel. So, before we begin, I got a bunch of comments on my video about the tramp stamps, about how y'all really liked when I was holding Tom Nook, so I think I'm just gonna keep holding my stuffed animals, because I have a lot. So today we're holding Toothless, and also I'm trying a different camera angle. I don't know if it's gonna be good, but we're trying it. So today we're talking about Gabbie Hanna. Gabbie Hanna, if you don't know, is a content creator that's been around for a really long time. She's a Viner turned YouTuber turned one of the internet's favorite punching bags. Gabbie was trending on Twitter recently, and whenever she trends on Twitter, it's never good. And as I was looking at what was going on, it got me thinking, and whenever I think, y'all know I come on here and I talk to y'all. This whole thing started when Gabbie tweeted and was talking about her writing process, because if you don't know, she has written 2 poetry books, Adultolescence and Dandelion, and she was sharing her frustration towards people, quote, who don't understand the creative license and purpose of poetry that pretend mine was bad because they couldn't grasp a neurodivergent brain. And then it very quickly derailed into Gabbie insulting people who don't like her work and calling out specific YouTubers who had made videos about her and claimed that they were harassing her and bullying her. And this entire thing just like made me have a conversation with myself, and now a conversation with you of, is Gabbie a victim? Does Gabbie create these problems for herself? And should Gabbie have a platform? And I know that those questions sound very harsh and there isn't really a nicer way to ask the questions, but we're going to break down a lot of what goes into those questions. This isn't a video where I go, Gabbie can't admit her poetry's bad, she should get help for her freakouts, or anything like that, because that's not productive, and it also goes into something that I'm going to talk about later in the video, which is how mentally ill people are treated online. But anyway, let's get into the Twitter thing first. She made this tweet where she says, quote, I still can't believe I wrote a funny, engaging, thematic poetry book about sexual assault, mortality, childhood abuse, mental illness, and suicidal ideation as my first release, and all people cared to share was link in bio and family is relatives. This immediately brings it to my first point, which is that Gabbie focuses more on the negative criticism than the positive, but she also can't admit when she's at fault as well. We'll see this in a second when she talks about Rachel Oates, but during this whole Twitter thing, she talks about how people online have mocked her work and don't see it as art, and basically use her as a punchline. And while that is true for some people, it's not true for everyone, and it's not true for the people that she uses as examples. But this is also just something that Gabbie has done her entire career. She focuses a lot more on the negativity than the positivity. So during her Twitter thing, she comes for Rachel Oates, who, if you don't know, is a poetry book YouTuber. Like, she likes to talk about poetry, review it, you know, stuff like that, and she has made a few videos about Gabbie's poetry. Gabbie makes Rachel out to be this vicious bully, and as someone who watched Rachel's videos about Gabbie's books before any of this even happened, I never got that energy. But just to be sure, I did go back and I rewatched Rachel's videos on Gabbie's books. Her first video is titled Gabbie Hanna's Poetry is Bad, and aside from the slightly clickbaity title, I truly didn't feel as if there was any malicious intent in this review. She uses a lot of language like to me or for me, which is basically just showing that this is her opinion and not a fact. And even at the beginning of the video, she talks about how poetry is all subjective and she's not, you know, an expert, and this is all just her opinion based off of her personal knowledge of poetry and other works from poets that she enjoys. And honestly, the video is just a calm opinion piece. Her second and third videos, which are, you know, just continuations of the first video, her first 3 videos videos are all about adultolescence. They're all the same. The only time Rachel gets more animated is in her 4th video, which is where she breaks down the book Dandelion. She does express her disappointment in Gabbie because at that point it had been 2 or 3 years after the release of Adultolescence, and she had that time to work on improving her writing, and Rachel was hoping that Gabbie had taken into consideration people's reviews and critiques of Gabbie's first book, but she felt like none of that happened because in Rachel's opinion the second book is worse than the first book. And really the most, oh my god, my camera's falling. The most aggressive Rachel gets is when she calls the book repetitive. She says that a lot of the poems are boring, and she says that a few of them are just straight up terrible. And even though that is a harsher critique, it's still an opinion that she's allowed to have, and it's still just a critique on Gabbie's work, not Gabbie as a person. I think that's the difference between Rachel and Gabbie. Rachel is critiquing Gabbie's work while Gabbie came for Rachel's character. Gabbie makes several tweets about Rachel and says stuff like, Rachel Oates has terrible taste, LMAO. She doesn't understand art. She's a bitch. Looks like you can't handle criticism. You, Miss Oates, are a real monster. No one cares about her unless she's talking about me. I was coming into this video trying to be on Gabbie's side, but this interaction makes it really hard to do that because aside from the fact that Gabbie literally sent Rachel her second book to be reviewed, Gabbie just sounds mean in this interaction. But then we see a similar interaction between Gabbie and a different creator, and it is a little bit easier to be on Gabbie's side, and that's the interaction between her and Angelica Oles. Angelica gets involved on Twitter in response to Gabbie calling Rachel a monster. Angelica says, I just think this is unnecessary. Say your part about criticism, hate, whatever you want to call it, but multiple tweets calling someone obsessive and a bully while being obsessive and a bully back is an interesting way to go about it. Gabbie responds by saying, oh, so standing up to a bully is bullying then? I'm the only person who's supposed to sit back and allow people to exploit and harass me because if I defend myself, I'm a bully. What are you? Shut the up, Angelica, get back to law school. And she includes some screenshots of Angelica's thumbnails and video titles about Gabbie, and it honestly does make Angelica look bad, but here's the thing, Angelica's a drama channel. The videos that she has made about Gabbie, they're not necessarily unbiased, but she's not making up blatant lies or insulting Gabbie or trying to assassinate her character or anything like that. What Angelica does in her videos is she'll say, you know, what's going on with the person, why they're being talked about, and then she gives her personal opinion. And I do think that there is some validity behind Gabbie's implication that she's being exploited by channels like Angelica, even though the word exploited might be being used liberally here, but channels like Angelica and even myself do make money from talking about other people. But I think saying that it's bullying to just talk about someone and give your opinion on a situation they're in is definitely a stretch. And that's something that I noticed when I was looking at this whole thing, is that Gabbie will say things that at first glance, they make sense, but then when you apply them to the situation that Gabbie's in, they don't apply. Like, standing up to your bully does not make you a bully. That's correct. But Rachel and Angelica aren't bullies. And then her claim about how she's the only person who's supposed to sit back and allow people to exploit and harass her is not true, and nobody has ever said that. And even despite that point, looking at this angry outburst on Twitter, it's very easy to look at this and go, oh, Gabbie's having another moment. But then you look at every other moment, and it does feel like she's just tired of being picked on by the internet and she's finally defending herself, and that makes sense and that's a fine thing to do. But then you apply the action of her defending herself to Gabbie and it doesn't feel completely justified, because at that point you have to ask, how much of this hate has Gabbie brought upon herself? In my opinion, as I said earlier, Gabbie's biggest issue is that she focuses on the negative more than the positive. There are several creators who have said positive things about Gabbie. One of them is James Marriott. In one of his videos about Gabbie, he does joke about the what if I'm the monster meme, and he says that she was really bad at singing, but then he says that he's only making fun of the way she used to sing because she's actually improved and gotten vocal coaching and she's really not that bad. And Drew Gooden as well, when he talked about her poetry book, he said that some of the poems were really good and he really enjoyed the illustrations in the book. And even aside from that, aside from other creators talking about you, you still have a very devoted fan base that love you and support you no matter what you do. Focus on that. Don't focus on the people hating you. But that leads into other issues that I think Gabbie has, which is, needing people to like her, not being able to distinguish criticism from hate, and not being able to admit when she's done something wrong. She can't not focus on people hating her because she wants people to like her. And you can see that in her tweet where she says, I still can't believe I wrote a funny, engaging, blah, 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 but all people care about is link in bio. She wants you to like her work so bad, and it just feels like she can't admit that not all of her work is good, or at least that not all of her work is for everyone. But also, if you want people to focus on the serious aspects of your poetry, don't throw a poem in your book that just says link in bio. Other examples of Gabbie not being able to admit she's in the wrong, even when it's not, completely her fault, she just can't take up her little bit of responsibility, are the Kenza Cosmetics situation and the situation with Trisha Paytas and Jason Nash. The Kenza Cosmetics situation is where basically Gabbie was paid to promote this brush brand, Kenza Cosmetics. They were claiming to sell luxury brushes for free. All you had to do was pay for shipping. But when people got the brushes, if they got them, because not everyone did, they were very cheap, and it was quickly discovered that it was not a luxury brand. And when Gabbie was called out for endorsing what was essentially a scam, she didn't really take responsibility at all. It was more of a, I'm sorry you feel that way kind of apology, and it's where the infamous lower your expectations video comes from.
And I'm genuinely sorry if anybody got their product and was disappointed in the product, but I would also add, manage your expectations a little bit.
And then the Trisha and Jason incident refers to when Trisha came out with a video about Gabbie, saying that Gabbie told Jason, who Trisha was dating at the time, that Trisha had herpes. And Trisha was very upset by that because even if they had herpes, it's not Gabbie's business, but it also wasn't true, and it wasn't Gabbie's place to talk to Jason. When this came out, Gabbie took to Instagram and basically said, well, Jason's my friend, what would you do for your friend? And she then put a poll on her story just asking her followers, what would you do? And obviously, if you're asking your fans something, they're going to side with you, even if they personally might disagree with it. And then there's the whole monster meme where she made a video where she was trying to be in on the joke, but throughout the video she would bring stuff up about the equipment used at the Genius interview, and it was basically her deflecting the blame yet again. And even if that's fair, if a mic blows out, a mic blows out, it still comes off as, I don't actually sing like that, I'm not actually bad, guys, like me, guys, please. I'm very conflicted about Gabbie Hanna though, because I can understand why she's so defensive. She's had the internet scrutinize her for years and years, even before it was the funny thing to do. Even back when she was in the vlog squad, she was the butt end of the joke within her friend group. And I think it's natural to want to defend yourself from that scrutiny, and I can even understand her wanting to be liked. Who doesn't want to be liked? But she still doesn't admit to whenever she's at fault for things. And she's also trying to get an audience to like her that is just not going to like her, and when she tries to get them to like her, it makes them dislike her even more. It's like that thing where it's, the harder and harder you try to hold on to something, the more it wants to get away. And this can lead to Gabbie being frustrated, and when she expresses her frustrations, it allows more people to laugh at her. And then there's also the conversation of mental illness, because Gabbie is mentally ill and neurodivergent, and that can explain some of her behaviors, and it can also make the scrutiny gets even worse in her head.
I meant to say the scrutiny she gets, but I just said the scrutiny gets.
I truly can understand her lashing out on Twitter or TikTok or wherever it is, because it's her mental illnesses being mocked and laughed at by the internet for a really long time. And I've seen so many people say that she needs to not be online, she needs to go get help, and it begs the question of, should mentally ill people have an online presence? And that's a very harsh question to ask, and there's obviously a lot that goes into it. Spoiler alert, my answer is yes, but let's talk about it. I think it's interesting how there's been such a growth in mental health awareness since the mid-2010s, yet there's simultaneously been this shift to where people online are just meaner. And it didn't start with TikTok, but I think that TikTok, oh my god, TikTok has definitely had a hand in that. So we have people like Gabbie who have been in distress or are upset about things and have been wrongly ridiculed, and it's broken her down, and it's clearly taking a toll on her. And we now have people who are like, dude, for your own sake, get off the internet. And it creates this weird atmosphere where people claim to be mental health advocates, but when someone that is mentally ill expresses that or does something that a mentally ill person does, they're then mocked and turned into a joke. And this is something that goes beyond Gabbie. It's becoming somewhat of a common occurrence. So now we have this contradiction where it's like, if you need help, try and get help, or at least if posting is causing harm to your mental health, then don't post the type of content that causes it. But then that leads to this implication of excluding mentally ill people from online spaces, which is something we shouldn't do. And then we can look at it and go, okay, let's just stop being so mean to people online. And just saying that has never worked. We've all seen the videos in middle and high school about anti-bullying and about your cyber footprint or whatever it was called. And yet we still have this issue knowing that it can lead to people harming themselves. But then we also don't know what can trigger what within certain people. And there's also the case where someone isn't intentionally trying to hurt someone, but they do on accident. And it's not really something they can control, but the damage has been done. Like, what do we do in this situation? Because in my personal opinion, I don't think it's good for Gabbie mentally to post, because she's at the point where almost anything she does will get backlash. But then it's also like, she shouldn't have to leave the internet because people are always trying to turn her into a joke. But then there's also the question of how much of it is justified, because I don't necessarily think Gabbie's a bad person, but I don't think that she's a perfect one at all, or a great one, because of how she reacts to things, how she causes certain situations, and how she acts within them. But then it's like, well, in some instances, she's acting this way because she is mentally ill and neurodivergent, you know? I don't know. I truly don't know. And I do want to hear what you guys think about it, because this is a conversation that does go beyond Gabbie Hanna. I really wanted to have a clear-cut answer at the end of this video, but there's so many contradictions and factors going into it. It's difficult questions that we're asking. I think, yes, Gabbie should have her platform. I don't think anyone's platform should be taken away because they're mentally ill. And I do think that Gabbie has been treated like shit the past few years, and to an extent it has not been justified. But I also think that Gabbie has done some things that are worthy of criticism, and I think that she has a track record of being deflective and not being able to differentiate between criticism and hate. And I do think that if she isn't getting help, that she should, and that's not because it's like, ooh, look at her, she's so crazy having a Twitter meltdown. I think that someone with a light on them and so many people scrutinizing them should have a strong support system, and I think that Gabbie can have that without leaving the internet. I also think that people are allowed to have opinions on Gabbie and criticize things that are worthy of criticism, but the internet really needs to give Gabbie a break. So yeah, that was my video on Gabbie Hanna. I don't know. I feel like it's still kind of open-ended. You know, I don't like when you guys take what I say as, you know, I'm so not in focus. I don't really want you guys to take things I say as, you know, law or fact or whatever, because I obviously don't know anything. And I think that this is a situation where there's just so much that goes into it that there could be things that I'm not even factoring in. And so I really do want to hear you guys' thoughts, and I really do want you guys to comment what you think about this. If you saw Gabbie's Twitter thing, I don't know what to call it. That's why I keep calling it a thing, because I don't want to call it a meltdown, because that's very negative language, but you know, the incident or whatever. I do want to know you guys' thoughts of just about everything, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, like it, and if you're new, consider subscribing, because I like talking about people, and I also do things in my personal life if you're interested in that. So yeah, and if you want to see me live stream, I live stream on Twitch every Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I will see you tomorrow, probably, unless it's Sunday. I just realized I'm stealing D'Angelo's outro. That was an accident. Okay, anyway, say goodbye to Toothless. And goodbye.